John, what's your full name again?
John Frankle.
And how long have you been sailing?
Oh, since 67.
Since 1967.
And I was working for a little company in Oregon, a flight company. And one of the guys had a Cal 20.
Cal 20, okay.
And he was in a class race. He had it, and there was a half a dozen of them, and they did class racing. He says, "You want to learn to sail?" And I said, "Sure."
Oh, what a great invite right there.
Oh yeah, I said, "Yeah, go."
So you were racing on a Cal 20 with a buddy.
Got to have 3 crew members. At that time, I was about 90 pounds less now than I am now. So he's checking weights, and he got one of the little girls behind the counter. It was a pretty good operation. We had about 6 girls behind the counter, dealing with a flight instructor. I was doing flight instructor, dealing with all that mess. And this one little gal, she probably weighed 100 pounds, pretty little gal. And he said, "Ask her." He's working on weight, you know. And we raced about 5 times. I think we actually started 1 time out of 5 attempts. We was racing in the Columbia River. Well, hell, the Columbia River's going out to the ocean at 6 knots, and we're trying to go into it with a 5 knot. It wasn't working.
Yeah. Backing up the whole time, right?
Tack back and forth. I learned how to sail, learned how to tack. You know, and we get right to the start line, and then inevitably,
I didn't know this boat had a reverse on it.
Yeah, so they'd blow the horn, we'd quit, and go to the guy's house to drink beer. That was what I think we started 1 time in a race. I don't remember who won even, but we got across the start line 1 time out of about 5 races. Or 5 or 6. And my wife came down one day, and she said, about one of the races, she said, "You guys ever start?" I said, "Well, yeah, we start, but we never got across the start line." She said, "Oh, who's all in it?" I said, "Me and Jim and I can't remember the little girl's name." She says, "Oh, that cute little girl that looks good in the bathing suit, that's the one."
That's the one, right there.
She says, "Well, what does she do?" I said, "She wears that little small 2-piece bathing suit she had, and she sits out there on the front and looks good." She said, "That's it? Yeah, got to have 3 people on the boat." She stays out of the way. She said, "Oh, okay, whatever." And this guy that we worked, he was living on the Columbia River, and in a houseboat. And they've been in and out on that deal. They've had them for a while, and then they kicked them all off the river, and then they hooked them up to the sewer somehow. That was the big deal. They want these people peeing in the river, for Christ's sakes.
They get a pump system set up. You were mentioning racing on the Columbia River and your experiences with that. I got pulled into the Dixie Sailing Club on Lake Martin the same way. I had bought this MFG. It was a 19-foot little cabin cruiser, and it was unclassified. So as I was racing everybody, they're like, "Well, we have nothing to compare you with." And I had this guy, he was 76 at the time, taking care of his 96-year-old parents, and he's like, "Hey, come race with me on this friggin' Flying Scott."
Yeah.
And I started doing that, and I put my boat back in the river. And so I had a house on the Alabama River, and John, it was not much wider than this, and I would go for miles up and down the Alabama River, tack, going into the current the whole time. And that's when I got good. It was like sitting there and having to tack that much to be able to go up. You'd be like, "Well, it only took like 2 hours to go, a mile and a half up the river, but I made it."
Then that I tell you, we tacked back and forth across the Columbia River. It's going down. We're at 6-7 knots, and we're making 3 knots. And we tack. The horn would go off, and we'd go drink beer. I think we tried 5 or 6 times. So I sailed with him, and I think we got across the line 1 time.
Golly.
And then but then nobody could do anything. We got across the line, and I can't remember what happened. They ended up calling that. We got up quite a ways, but I don't think we made the first mark. I says, "Is this racing?" And he says, "No, that's not really racing," but he says, "It's a lot of fun, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah, it is a lot of fun."
At that point, you would think that they would set up a course where they would go way upriver and set it up so that your tacks were kind of crosswind, and that way you could just motor back up to wherever you're going.
Well, they started where everybody lived, in these houses on the river, because all their boats were in their houses.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then so they get out. We started. You're right. We should have started, but how the hell would it get him up there? You'd have to truck them up there. Yeah, it's
nobody had any motors.
No
motors on them?
No, those Cal 20s didn't have a motor.
I'd have figured they'd have had like a little 1.5 or 2 horsepower or something.
Well, that's what we had on that Coronado, and we never, because I learned to sail that way, and I got in the Virgin Islands. Hell, there was no current right once in a while. The only thing we got becalmed one day. It was like this, not even this much. It was hot, and we sat out there just halfway between St. John's and Calibra. We just sat out there, and my wife sitting down below. They got in there, no air conditioning. They had the vents open and everything, but it was hot. And about every half an hour, she'd hand me another beer out there. I said, they say it lasts about 5 minutes. She said, I don't want you drunk.
Wow.
You know? I said, oh, okay.
No solar power back then, right?
Solar power?
You had no solar power?
No.
So you just had a cooler. Were you drinking hot beers?
Well, no, she had a cooler with ice in it.
Okay.
That was what we did when we took off and cruised all the Virgin Islands in that little boat. We'd get someplace, we'd say, where do you get ice? Oh, such and such port. Went port to port looking for ice. And they didn't have ice machines like we have here. So what they do is they take waste cans and fill them full of water and put them in a freezer. So we had these big chunks of ice. Yeah.
Were y'all fishing a lot when you were living aboard back then?
Yeah, I fished, had a line out all the time.
I bet.
I caught a lot of fish, even in the recent years. Always drag a meat hook behind me. You know.
Gotta have it. You know, sailboats have come a long way since then. It's like your island packet now, it's got solar power on it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I put it on.
You know, one of my favorite things about having solar power on a boat and refrigeration on your boat is ice trays. Like, oh my God, the boat that I have now is the first one that I've had refrigeration on, where I can take a couple ice trays. There's nothing like a day like today and putting some ice and some cold drinks.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, that trip that's really sold me on cruising. I said, when I get older and can get a bigger boat, I'm gonna make sure that we have an ice something. Yes, it was just a lot of fun. But at that time, like I say, all we did was go from port to port looking for ice and food and whatever else, you know. I'd head off to get ice. Yeah, I'd go off and get these big chunks of ice, and the wife would go off and get food. You know, we didn't have any refrigeration. We had a stove. Of all things, we had a stove. Built kind of like a built-in camp stove is what it amounted to.
Had to have one.
But she could cook on it. She cooked it, and we didn't do any fancy meals. But and the cruising and way back then, the cruises were different. They just had a different attitude about it, you know.
You know, it seems like all the boats have gotten bigger since
gosh,
I was a kid too.
Well, I unpack it. I got refrigeration and I got a stove in it, and it sails pretty decent.
They sail great.
Yeah, they said it's slow. I said, slow? You know, you don't know slow. I said, you tack across the Cumberland River 6 times, you haven't made a foot. You can't get across the start line. But that was a big social deal. But I learned how to sail. And this little gal that was with us, I don't think she did, but she didn't really care. She's out there looking good, and guys are making passes at her. And when the race was over, we would go to somebody's house. And they all lived on the river, on the Columbia River, these little houseboat things. And so we'd go to somebody's house. And she was young, and there was some younger guys there, you know. So her social life was real good. She enjoyed that part. My wife come around and says, what does she really do on that boat? I said, she sits there and looks pretty. You know, that's what she stayed all the way.
You don't need no money when you look like that, do you, honey?
My second wife, of Alabama, couldn't understand her. I tell you,
we got our own dialect down here now.
Well, and somebody said Mobile's got their own dialect.
Yeah, we do.
And I was sitting in his class, and she was up behind me with a county sheriff deputy. I knew him, County Mountie, we called him, right? And they walked in. I said, "She's kind of cute, but she's with that cop, you know." So I never. And besides, I was still in the throes of getting divorced, and that is a period of time where you can't have a girlfriend of any kind. And
I went through that one time.
I hate to tell you this. I went 11 years in a 2-year college. Well, hell, I'd go.
That sounds like some of my buddies when we were in our 20s. I was like, I graduated in 3.5 years, and some of them were on the 7-year plan.
Well, yeah, I was on on GI Bill plan, and they paid 2 years. I'd take 2 years. Well, actually, the credits. So I could drag that 2 years out to about 3 years, almost 4 years, and then it ran out. And then they started another war. I was in Korea. Then they started Vietnam, and then so every war, they extended my.
You got another extension on your GI Bill?
Yeah, and more money. So 11 years and don't get a degree. Now the last year I went, they made me get a degree. They said, 11 years.
You should have 3 degrees by now.
Well,
on a PhD.
The guy was checking. This guy, young man, was checking me in. You need this and this and this to finish your degree in this and this. And he says, "You had this mathematics course, which I didn't like, 11 years ago." Oh, he says, "We'll have to redo that one." I said, "You mean your education is only good for 11 years?" He says, "Oh, man, okay, you give me credit for it." But they cut me off on education. I got a degree, but what the hell?
In Alabama, every farmer has a PhD.
Is that right?
That's right. All you got to do is check in their barn. They got a set of post hole diggers and some shovels and whatever else you need there too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I met my future wife in that class. And I didn't date her I took her on one date. That was the date from hell,
Well, the Alabama girl you couldn't understand?
Yeah, I could finally understand her. She'd learned how to speak English. So anyway, this gal I married was sitting up behind me in this little amphitheater thing. And every day she'd come in with this comp. Well, her ride broke down. I just got to give you the whole scenario. That doesn't work. Her ride to this. Oh, first of all, here we go. Where do you live? I live with my brother-in-law in his basement with my son and a golden retriever. Wow. And I says, "Really?"
Run!
Run. And I can't understand her anyway, you know.
And he let you out of the basement?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well. So her ride broke down. She was riding with some gal down on the side of Mount Hood. They lived up on Mount Hood. You know what that is? It's east of Portland, Oregon. It's a big mountain. Can't miss it. So she lived up there with her brother. He's in his business, in his basement with her son and a golden retriever.
Golly, what a
so I said, right? So I'm really into that, and I'm right in the middle of this divorce. I've got about a couple of months before I can even date anybody. And I don't know if that's what my attorney told me. She said,
yeah, that's what mine told me.
You can relate to it because I'm not the kids, but the attorney said, if you do this stuff, if you date another girl, first thing he said, rat, he says, get rid of your girlfriend. I said, I don't have a girlfriend. I said, I don't have a girl. Yeah, I don't have a girl. Well, okay, well, don't see her anymore. And that's the way he talked the whole time. He never got off that. So
why do we get punished?
Okay, now we can really relate, right? And here's this gal I can't understand. And shit breaks down, and she's riding with some woman in a Volkswagen, and the radiator broke, and all the water come out. And I thought, Volkswagens don't have radiators. Yeah, they do. I didn't know. I'm thinking of the old Volkswagen Beetle. She had some kind of station wagon. So she couldn't get home. So everybody said, do this and do that. I said, there's a Continental bus
right up the road.
Continental bus that comes through here, and they said he stops at that filling station right over there for $1. He'll drop you off at some little place up in the side of Mount Hood where you're close to. I think I wasn't sure. Oh, she didn't know how to do that. So and now everybody's on my back because seem to be. I said, well, how about that sheriff, the deputy sheriff? He was sitting there. I said, why don't you take her? He says, I can't. My wife's in the hospital having a baby. I said, well, this is not my business, because I thought they were an item. Right? They weren't. They just had a previous class together that they walked into this one every time. So I said, all right. So the Three Little Rascals.
Fate was bringing you together with an Alabama
girl. It
girl.
really was. I'll tell you, I couldn't even understand it. The Three Little Rascals are sitting down there, and they're typing in, Well, you can take it just this and that. I said, listen, I got a class at 6 o'clock. I can't miss these classes. And this was like noon, 1 o'clock. So I said, and besides that, it's gas buddy. There's a consideration. Well, the Three Little Rascals and somebody else harped in, and I said, no, I'm the bad guy. So I said, okay. I said,
get in, let's go.
Yeah. I said, I only got time to take you up there and to live in your basement, your brother's basement with your dog. And I said, okay. So I got to get right back, just drop you off, and it's just not, So I did. I drove her up that mountain like this. I felt like I was doing it. I just knew that my wife would be behind, my former wife would be right behind me, writing this down.
Taking
I'd be dead.
pictures with a private investigator.
I'd be
like,
dead.
yeah, look, he's taking his girlfriend home.
But that didn't happen. And I dropped her off. Well, we pulled into their brother's house on this golf course up there on the side of Mount Hood. Beautiful. I'd played the golf course before. It's a fantastic golf course. Beautiful house. 4,200 square foot house.
Wow, that's a big house.
And she's in the basement. It's a 2,000 square foot basement.
Wow.
And the view and big. I envisioned these little windows in the basement.
In a basement, the size of this right here. She's in there with a bed up in the corner.
Yeah, down there with her son and his dachshund, this golden retriever. So I said, well, it's this big house, and her half is 2,000 square feet with picture windows in it. I mean, big windows. So out the door, and she's just barely out the door. I pull it shut. That was it.
No phone number switching or nothing, huh?
Oh no, this is out the door. That's all I needed was a picture of me kissing this girl or something. So she, and we didn't really communicate any different at school. And I had gotten a call that morning. It was a Friday. But my attorney says, "Hey, case final. You got to go in Monday for the judge to hit the gavel." He said, "But you're divorced."
All right.
And I said, okay. So, but all the girls that are around there, I mean, they were like 16 to 18. I'm an old guy. They went to school with my kids, I can't date them. Some of them were available. They got a daddy complex, I think. So what the hell do they want an old guy for? So I stayed away from that. But these Three Little Rascals were sitting down there talking about this movie. You got to go see it. And I says, okay, I go see a movie in a local theater. You got to take somebody. I said, I don't know anybody, but I said, no. And they're doing this head thing. And she's sitting up behind me. So I turned around and looked, and she was sitting up there. The cop was gone. I said, what happened to the cop? His wife's having a baby in the hospital, having a baby. I said, oh, you want to go see a movie? Yeah. I said, oh, shit. Better open my mouth and put my foot right down.
I want to hold this right here and stand right over your shoulder. Hey, this is my friend John, and this is for all of you solo single sailors out there. If you are looking for a perfect way to find the perfect woman to live on a sailboat with you and go sailing around the world, Yeah, just ask John. It only takes 5 or 6 years and kind of beating all the way around everything, and you'll finally find the right girl after everything is done.
That's true.